Hey kids, can I tell you a secret? Come here, closer. Nuclear energy? It's not a bad thing.
Sure, 30 years ago, things like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island were certainly something to worry about. Today, however, it's a different story. Let me tell you kids about thorium. Thorium is uranium's neighbor, just 2 houses down. He's a lot like uranium, just he's a lot more chill. Uranium's the type to do a half-assed job during the day and spend every night doing Jaeger bombs and blasting Kendrick Lamar, you know the type. Thorium, on the other hand, is more career-oriented, and at the end of the day, he's cool with just watching Netflix, eating Ben & Jerry's. Let me walk you through all the steps of nuclear power, and you'll see why thorium is so great. Let's start with mining. So when somebody doesn't feel like getting out of bed, they'll, whine and moan and roll over. Likewise, when uranium doesn't want to get out of bed, he releases deadly cancer-inducing radon gas. This means workers have to put up expensive ventilation systems just to, not die. Thorium's chill. You go to wake him up, he understands he's got a job to do, goes without a fuss. And even when you do get uranium up, like the lazy bastard he is, he has much less concentration in his ore compared to thorium, so more work has to be done just to get the same amount of material. The Earth's crust also has much more thorium in total than uranium, about 3 times as much. So you got your ore, and you've extracted it. Ready for work, right? Wrong. You see, natural uranium mainly consists of 2 different isotopes, uranium-235 and uranium-238. 238 kinda sucks at life, so uranium has to undergo enrichment to up its concentration of 235. Uranium's kinda like that kid with ADHD, right? You got him in the building, but you still gotta give him his own little room and a couple Ritalin before he starts doing anything productive. That's expensive. Thorium, on the other hand, look at him. He's got his sneakers laced, glasses on. He's ready to go. No enrichment needed. Finally, you're ready to make some power. This part's important, kids. Pay attention. So this is where the biggest difference between uranium and thorium comes in. You see, uranium is fissile, whereas thorium is fertile. This means uranium can do his job all by himself, just doing his thing all on his own, whereas thorium's kind of a cripple. He needs a little bit of someone else just to give him the push he needs to start releasing energy. This might sound like a bad thing, but if you think about it, it's a lot safer. If you've got your power production process started, and shit suddenly hits the fan, uranium's just gonna keep going. You can try to move him around, cool him down or whatever, but at the end of the day, this man's gonna be swinging, and it's not gonna be a good day for anyone. Thorium, he's only got 1 leg. Piss him off, he takes a swing at you. Just push him over, you're good. Please note, Salmonella Academy does not condone pushing cripples. And that's what thorium reactors do. They allow the barely radioactive liquid thorium to drain away from its helper in the event of an accident, so there's no way for things to escalate. Much safer. But while the process for thorium is better, most of the time people care more about the results. Well, it just so happens thorium is pimpin' in that regard as well. CERN estimates that 1 ton of thorium is capable of producing as much energy as 200 tons of uranium. That's a lot. To compare, that's also equivalent to 3.5 million tons of coal. But let's talk about byproducts. Thorium, being as pure as it is compared even to enriched uranium, produces about 100 times less nuclear waste. So whereas we might not have as many X-Men, that also means much less work has to be done to dispose of the material. Additionally, it's very difficult to make a nuclear weapon out of thorium, since it can't do much on its own. The only thing that's really weaponizable about thorium plants is that little bit of helper material I talked about earlier. But overall, that's a pretty minuscule amount. That means we can feel a lot better about plopping these plants down in places like Iran. So kids, you heard it here first. Thorium is the future. Powerful, clean, reliable, and if things go wrong at the end of the day, you can still kick its ass. Hey kids, it's Food Friday. So today, I'm going to cover some of the deadly toxins found in your local produce section. Our first item is rhubarb. Now, the part of the rhubarb that you normally eat, the delicious red stalk, is virtually toxin-free, so no worries there. It's the greenery of the plant that's a cause for concern. The leaves of the rhubarb plant contain small amounts of oxalic acid, which is toxic to humans. And it's not a fun poison either, not one of those drift off to dreamland types. It will mess your day up, particularly in the digestive and renal areas. Some symptoms include breathing difficulty, burning of the mouth and throat, eye pain, bloody urine, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, convulsions, coma, and only then will you finally receive the sweet release of death. course, you'd need like a shitload of leaves to actually reach the lethality point, about 11 pounds for a 150-pound person. To put that into perspective, the average person eats around 4 pounds of food a day total, so to eat that weight of anything would be very difficult. Next up are almonds. So you know how they say cyanide reeks of almonds? Turns out it's actually the other way around. Sweet almonds, the type people normally eat, contain a bit of the toxin, just enough to get a whiff. After eating about a pound of them, you may experience some of the more mild symptoms which, while they're not exactly fun, aren't quite as bad as oxalic acid. In order for the poison to actually be deadly, you would have to eat around 4 pounds of almonds in the course of a couple hours. Considering that's the total food intake daily for an average person, and that you would be vomiting, cramping, and hyperventilating the whole time, it'd be hard to pull off. Next are apple seeds. Most of you are probably familiar with this one. Apple seeds contain cyanogenic glycosides, which are materials that produce cyanide once they enter the digestive system. These chemicals also have a significant presence in a whole menagerie of other produce items, but out of all of these, apple seeds will give you the most bang for your buck as far as potency goes. You would only need around 3.5 ounces of the seeds to do yourself in, which is a lot easier to pull off than the last two. Of course, the whole point of seeds in fruit is so that things will eat them and crap them out elsewhere to spread the plant around, which would be pretty hard to do if the thing carrying your babies keels over and dies. For this reason, the glycosides are only accessible when one crushes the seeds open. Whole seeds are relatively safe. But if you really wanted to off yourself, you could toss 18 apple cores in a blender and drink the whole thing. The most virulent thing you'll find in your entire produce section, however, is none other than the kidney bean. Yes, this innocent-looking legume holds some sinister secrets. Kidney beans contain a toxin known as phytohemagglutinin, and as little as 4 raw beans worth is enough to trigger symptoms. The main sign of kidney bean poisoning is known scientifically as two-tip tummy terrorism. Boiling the beans deactivates the toxin, which is why we can eat them normally, but heating the beans below the boiling point, as in a slow cooker, actually increases the toxin's potency, to the point where a single heated bean is enough to get you blasting out of both ends. I couldn't actually find any reports on deaths caused by the toxin, probably because everyone who ingests it ends up propelling it away from them at high velocities a few hours later. But it'll certainly make you want to die at least. There are a bunch of other minor sources of poison present in your produce section, of course. I just decided to highlight a few. Anyway, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching. Hey kids, let me tell you a story. This is about something that happened when I was around 11. One day I was just walking through the woods with my dog, not a care in the world, when I see this guy approaching from the other end. He was all by himself, and he had a football. And every now and then he would just toss the football up in the air, catch it, and then keep walking. When I walked past him, he muttered something along the lines of, "Hey kid, you want some football?" I assume he was propositioning me to a game of catch. Or maybe he just didn't like that football very much, I'm not quite sure. But between this guy's strange nature and the fact that he was 17 and I was around 11, I turned him down. I took the dog home, and later that day, me and my friend were back at the woods, just hitting shit with sticks, I guess. I don't know, whatever kids do. We were mostly chilling in the same place, and a little ways in, I see the guy walk past again. I think it's a bit strange, but as he turns the corner, I neglect to mention anything to my friend about my previous encounter. Around 2 minutes later, I hear some grown man shouting angrily, and my friend and I turn to look. Somehow, we were so engrossed in our nothing we were doing, that we somehow failed to notice the giant plumes of smoke rising up from where that guy turned the corner. I'm talking huge, like if a member of the Vape Nation happened to see these clouds, he'd probably go into diabetic shock. The shouts were coming from our neighbor, whose house bordered on the woods, and he must have spotted the smoke before we did. So he's shouting things along the lines of,
"What the fuck do you think you're doing? I'm gonna call the fucking cops on you. What is this?"
That's when the guy goes fucking ballistic.
"No, please, I don't want to go to jail. It was an accident."
And a few high-pitched screeches, which I don't think I'm able to replicate. My friend and I walk over to get a closer look. We see the guy standing on the edge of this huge ground fire. I'm talking at least 10 meters in diameter. Pitch black grass, smoke rising up, flames still around the edges. Now this guy must have been like a Boy Scout or something, Because, like I said, it was about a minute and a half between him turning the corner and hearing the guy shouting. Maybe the football was just a propane tank he painted brown? Could have been a pyromancer for all I know. It was about that time that my friend and I realized that, as two young hip delinquents, it was not in our best interest to be standing in the near vicinity of a forest fire. So we skedaddled. As we heard sirens approach in the distance, I couldn't help but wonder what this guy's motive was. A few days later, I found out the guy lived somewhat nearby, and that he had mild autism. Yeah. That cleared a good bit up for me, because I have a couple friends on the spectrum, and they're good people, but sometimes they just do things. Nowhere near full-blown arson, mind you, more just along the lines of screaming fuck at the teacher and then walking out in the middle of class. But you get the idea. So the moral of the story here, kids, is that if somebody wants to play catch with you, you let them, or else they might unleash the fucking inferno. Hey kids, today I'll be teaching you how to read these things. The symbol is technically known as NFPA 704, but nobody really calls it that. Most people refer to it as a fire diamond, or a safety square, or if you're British, a figmenty pigmenty crosser tosser, whatever floats your boat. Anyway, when you see the symbol, usually on a door or a container or something, it means there's a hazardous material present, and the numbers and symbols on the diamond give information on exactly how dangerous that material is. So first off, notice the 4 colors, right? Each one represents a different type of hazard. Red is for flammability because fire and burning things are usually red. Yellow is for chemical reactivity, I guess because chemical reactions involve swapping electrons and electricity is yellow, sure. Blue is for health hazards because fuck you. And then white is just extra space for other stuff. So the 3 colored diamonds, or if you want to be politically correct, the African American diamonds, each have a number from 0 to 4. And each of these is like a threat level for that category. If the number is 0, it basically means you'd have to be some kind of professional to manage to fuck things up in that fashion. Sand, for example, has a 0 in its flammability. The only time sand burns is when it's wedged in the cracks of your Speedo for too long. However, please note that the health section does not apply to ingestion. For example, motor oil has a blue rating of 0, but that in no way makes it safe to drink. If the number is 1, that means there's a threat present, but you'd still have to be like an advanced level dumbass in order to really find it. Cellulose, the primary chemical found in paper, has a flammability of 1, so don't, hold it over a fire for a while, and you'll be fine. 2 is where things start being kind of a big deal. Capsaicin, the chemical that makes peppers spicy, has a health risk of 2. You finish chopping your jalapenos, and then you go touching your jalapenis. It's not gonna kill you or nothing, but it's gonna mess your day up for sure. If you see a 3, that's when you know you gotta watch out. Gasoline, it's got a flammability of 3, and we all know gasoline. You see gasoline walking by, you better take the cigarette out of your mouth, get the static off your clothes, fix your hair, make yourself presentable, don't make eye contact. That's the only way to keep yourself safe. And then 4 is the highest number on the scale. If you see a 4, the best thing to do is just start walking backwards, because if you're close enough to read that 4, chances are you're not where you need to be. Nitroglycerin has a reactivity of 4. If you soak a tissue in nitroglycerin and give it to your friend to sneeze in, that sneeze will result in his entire goddamn face getting blown off. So yeah, 4s are nothing to sneeze at. Literally. Now let's move on to the bottom bit. Unlike me, this diamond isn't just a big white waste of space. This is the spot for any extra warnings you need to know about. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory, like radiation, or biohazard, or gaze, so I'll just go through a few that aren't as easy to interpret. Take a look at this one. Unless you hear faint mooing while you're reading it, chances are it doesn't mean what you think. OX is short for oxidizer, which is basically something that produces oxygen when exposed to heat. This doesn't sound so bad until you realize that heat plus oxygen rarely ends well for most fuels in the vicinity. If you see this one, it means white people aren't allowed to touch the material. Just kidding. White people are allowed to do whatever they want. It actually means don't mix with water, or else it could explode or multiply or something. Ese means simple asphyxiant, referring to gases like helium. It basically means that while this gas isn't poisonous, it's also, not air. So if you breathe it for too long, you will still die. Alright kids, so now that you know all the ins and outs of these things, let me give you a little quiz. On the left we got a bunch of things, and on the right we have a bunch of fire diamonds. Pause the video now and see if you can match them up correctly. All done? Here are the answers. So now you know all about NFPA 704. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching.